Chapter 1. The Galactic Challenge. The Troll Empire was an unrivaled force in the galaxy, its reputation cemented through centuries of conquest. Known for their towering frames, luminous cobalt skin, and strength, the Troll were a warrior race bred for domination. Their leaders often believed that any species they encountered could either be subdued or annihilated. For General Lerva, such notions were more than just doctrine. They were her life's work. Lerva was a living legend. Her campaigns against the Arachni swarm had become the stuff of galactic history books, her victories over the Kithran Confederacy displayed on endless battle maps. As a general, she was precise, ruthless, and unyielding. To her soldiers, she was a symbol of Troll supremacy. To her enemies, she was fear itself. Yet for all her accomplishments, there was one species she had never personally encountered: humans. The humans of Sol were a relatively recent entry into the galactic stage. Their small sector of space, carved out with what seemed like luck and determination, was dismissed by most empires as irrelevant. Troll intelligence reported that humans were a scattered species, limited in technology and fragile compared to most others. However, scattered reports of human ingenuity and unpredictability intrigued Lerva. A part of her dismissed the species as insignificant, but another part, her tactical mind, wanted to test their mettle. When a small human-controlled sector encroached on the edge of Troll territory, the Empire saw an opportunity to assert dominance. Lerva's fleet was dispatched to secure the border and show the humans their place. To her, it was just another operation, a minor engagement compared to the campaign she had led before. Their first encounter came faster than expected. Her fleet detected a lone human scavenger ship drifting near a debris field in contested space. It was a simple vessel, primitive by Troll standards, and yet its very presence on the edge of their domain was an insult. Lerva ordered her fleet to intercept the ship, expecting an easy capture. The human vessel didn't run. It didn't even attempt evasive maneuvers. Instead, it hovered in place, as if its pilot was daring them to act. Lerva's curiosity was piqued. Perhaps this human wanted to negotiate? Or maybe they were so resigned to their fate that resistance seemed futile. The scavenger ship was quickly disabled by the Troll's tractor beams and dragged aboard the flagship. Lerva watched from the observation deck as her soldiers marched toward the ship's airlock, weapons drawn, prepared for anything. What emerged from the vessel wasn't a group of desperate humans, but a single individual: Ethan Cross. He was underwhelming at first glance. Average height, lean build, dressed in worn-out civilian clothes. His dark hair was unkempt, and his expression carried a nonchalant air that Lerva found irritating. This was the threat humanity posed? This singular individual who had dared to drift so close to her fleet? "Bring him to me," she commanded. Minutes later, Ethan stood before her in the bridge's main chamber. Lerva sat on her elevated command throne, her imposing presence magnified by the holographic projections of her previous conquests. She expected the human to cower, to show some semblance of fear. Instead, he met her gaze with an unsettling calm. "So, this is what an alien warlord looks like," Ethan remarked, his tone light. "Not bad. Very shiny." Lerva narrowed her eyes. "You dare speak so casually in the presence of your captor?" "Captive? Sure. Scared?" "Not really," Ethan replied, shrugging. His eyes wandered across the room, taking in the displays and weaponry. "You've got quite the setup here. Overcompensating for something?" Lerva's soldiers stiffened, expecting their general to lash out. But she didn't. Instead, she studied Ethan with a mix of annoyance and intrigue. Most prisoners begged or pleaded. Some tried to bribe their way out. But this human seemed utterly unfazed. "Do you know who I am?" she asked, her voice dripping with authority. "Yeah, I caught the gist from your soldiers," Ethan said, gesturing vaguely. "General Lerva, big shot in the Troll Empire, conqueror of countless worlds, yada yada. Let me guess you're here to add Earth to your collection?" Lerva's lips curled into a smirk. "You speak boldly for someone so fragile. Do all humans share your arrogance, or are you just an anomaly?" "Arrogance? No. It's called confidence," Ethan replied, crossing his arms. Though I'd say it's a bit ironic coming from someone who probably has an entire planet worshipping their ego. That caught her off guard. For a moment, she wasn't sure how to respond. Lerva prided herself on her ability to dominate any conversation, to assert control over any interaction. Yet this insignificant scavenger was holding his ground. "You misunderstand your position," she said, rising from her throne. At nearly 7 feet tall, Lerva towered over Ethan, her cobalt skin glinting under the chamber's lights. She took deliberate steps toward him, her eyes locked onto his. "You are nothing more than a speck in the vast expanse of the galaxy. Your kind should know its place." Ethan tilted his head, unimpressed. "And what place is that? Under your boot?" "If necessary." "And you wonder why humans don't take kindly to visitors," Ethan quipped. "Here's a tip. If you're trying to intimidate someone, maybe don't sound like a Saturday morning cartoon villain." The room fell silent. Lerva's soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how their general would react. Lerva, however, felt something she hadn't experienced in years: genuine curiosity. "You're either brave or foolish," she said, stopping just inches from him. "Perhaps both. But that doesn't matter. You will answer my questions, human, or you will suffer the consequences." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Questions? Sure, fire away. Just don't expect me to roll over and beg." The audacity of this man was infuriating and yet fascinating. Lerva had faced warlords and rebels, diplomats and kings. None of them had dared to speak to her this way. It wasn't just defiance. It was something deeper, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. "Take him to the interrogation chamber," she ordered, her voice sharp. "We'll see how long his bravado lasts." As Ethan was escorted away, Lerva couldn't help but watch him go. There was something about this human, something that irritated and intrigued her in equal measure. She had intended to break him, to make him an example of humanity's weakness. But for the first time, she wondered if this might be a challenge unlike any she had faced before. Alone on the bridge, Lerva stared out into the void of space, her thoughts consumed by the strange human who refused to be cowed. This would be no ordinary conquest. Of that, she was certain. Chapter 2. A Game of Wills. Ethan Cross had been interrogated before. Pirates, mercenaries, and even corrupt Earth government officials had all tried their hand at prying information from him. But none of them prepared him for General Lerva. The Troll warlord exuded an aura of dominance, her towering frame and sharp cobalt features designed to intimidate. The interrogation chamber aboard her flagship was equally oppressive, a cold, metallic room with faintly pulsing walls, as though the ship itself was alive and watching. Yet, Ethan remained unimpressed. His demeanor was calm, his eyes flicking around the room with mild curiosity. To Lerva, his lack of fear was a mystery and an irritation. "Do you understand the situation you're in, human?" Lerva asked, her voice low and measured, her tone carrying the weight of countless victories. "You are aboard my ship, in my custody. Your life is entirely in my hands." Ethan leaned back in his chair, chains clinking softly against the table. "Yeah, I got that part. What I'm struggling with is why you're wasting your time on me. Don't you have planets to conquer or something?" Lerva's jaw tightened. She stepped closer, her boots clicking sharply against the floor. She towered over him, her cobalt skin glowing faintly in the chamber's light. "Your defiance is tiresome. You should fear me, human." Ethan tilted his head, his expression thoughtful. "Fear you? You're impressive, sure. Tall, intimidating, probably bench press a small car. But fear? No, not feeling it." Her eyes narrowed. Few beings dared to speak to her this way, especially not prisoners. "Your arrogance is misplaced. I could snap you in half without effort." Ethan smirked. "Probably. But where's the fun in that? You wouldn't learn anything about me if you killed me too quickly." That gave her pause. He was right, of course. As much as she wanted to break him, she needed information first about humanity's technology, their tactics, their weaknesses. The Troll Empire prided itself on overwhelming its enemies with calculated precision, and knowing their adversary was critical. But Ethan's resistance was proving to be a puzzle she hadn't expected. Lerva folded her arms, her gaze piercing. You're remarkably confident for someone in chains. Do all humans share your lack of survival instinct, or are you an anomaly? Ethan shrugged. Maybe a bit of both. Humans have a knack for surviving the impossible. It's kind of our thing. She raised an eyebrow. Surviving? That's a generous term for a species that barely crawled out of its own atmosphere a few centuries ago. Sure, Ethan said. We're not as old or as shiny as your empire, but we get by. You'd be surprised what humans can achieve when their backs are against the wall. Is that supposed to impress me? Lerva asked, leaning closer. Her sharp features loomed over him, her cobalt eyes glowing faintly. Your knack for survival won't save you here. You're alone, outmatched, and at my mercy. Ethan met her gaze without flinching. Maybe, but here's the thing. You're not killing me. You're talking to me, which means I've got something you want. So who's really in control here? The room fell silent. Lerva's soldiers, watching from the shadows, exchanged uneasy glances. No one spoke to the general like this. Yet, she didn't strike him down. Instead, she straightened, her expression unreadable. Bold words, she said finally, but they won't protect you. You will tell me what I want to know. And what is it you want to know? Ethan asked, his tone light. Our plans? Our weaknesses? How to make the perfect cup of coffee. Her lips curled into a faint smirk despite herself. His defiance was infuriating, but there was something almost entertaining about his irreverence. She hadn't expected this from a human, a species she had dismissed as fragile and primitive. You think this is a game, she said, her voice sharp. But I assure you, it is not. Ethan leaned forward, the chains on his wrists clinking softly. Maybe not a game, but it's definitely a challenge. You're trying to break me, and I'm trying to figure you out. Guess we'll see who wins. Lerva's eyes narrowed. She was used to being the one in control, the one who dominated every interaction. But Ethan's calm defiance was unsettling. It wasn't arrogance, was something deeper, something she couldn't quite place. You misunderstand your position, she said, her tone icy. You are nothing, a mere speck in the galaxy. Your species is weak, scattered, and irrelevant. Then why are you here? Ethan countered. Why waste your time on a speck? If we're so weak, why not just wipe us out and move on? Her jaw tightened. It was a good question, one she didn't have a satisfying answer for. The trawl had encountered countless species, most of which had folded easily under their might. But humanity was different. They were unpredictable, tenacious, and Ethan, for all his irreverence, embodied those traits perfectly. You're here because I'm curious, she admitted. Your species is unusual, fragile, yet resilient, primitive, yet resourceful. I want to understand what makes you tick. Ethan's smirk widened. Careful, General. Curiosity killed the cat. And satisfaction brought it back, she retorted, surprising herself with the quip. For a moment, they stared at each other, the tension in the room shifting. It wasn't the oppressive tension of an interrogation, but something else, something more dynamic. Lerva found herself intrigued, not just by Ethan's defiance, but by the way he challenged her assumptions. He wasn't groveling, begging for mercy, or trying to bargain. He was meeting her on equal footing, despite the obvious power imbalance. Tell me something human, she said, breaking the silence. What drives your kind? Why do you persist in a galaxy that is so clearly beyond your reach? Ethan's expression softened, and for the first time, his tone lost its sarcasm. Because we have to. Because if we don't, who will? Humanity isn't perfect, but we're stubborn. We keep going, no matter what. Lerva studied him, her curiosity deepening. She had expected arrogance or fear, but his answer carried a quiet determination that unsettled her. It wasn't the bravado of a cornered animal, but the resolve of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. You're an enigma, Ethan Cross, she said finally. But make no mistake, I will find your breaking point. Ethan leaned back, his smirk returning. Good luck with that. You're not the first to try, and I doubt you'll be the last. As Lerva left the chamber, her thoughts were consumed by the strange human who refused to break. She had set out to dominate him, to prove her superiority. But for the first time in her career, she wondered if she had underestimated her opponent. Chapter 3. The Breaking Point. Lerva paced the bridge of her flagship, her thoughts clouded by the enigma that was Ethan Cross. No matter what tactic she tried, threats, intimidation, even subtle attempts at psychological manipulation, the human refused to yield. Worse, he seemed to thrive under pressure, turning every confrontation into a battle of wits. Her officers, sensing her frustration, kept their distance. The Trawl weren't accustomed to failure, especially not their legendary general. Yet here she was, locked in a stalemate with a single human. Back in the interrogation chamber, Ethan sat calmly in his chair, his chains hanging loosely from the table. He wasn't just enduring her efforts, he was enjoying them. When Lerva returned to the chamber, her expression was unreadable. She approached the table slowly, her boots clicking against the metallic floor. Ethan watched her with a faint smirk, his demeanor unchanged. "Back for more?" he asked, his tone light. "You must really enjoy our little chats." "Enough games," Lerva snapped, slamming her hands on the table. The force reverberated through the room, but Ethan didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back, his smirk widening. "All right," he said. "Let's get serious. What do you really want from me?" Lerva narrowed her eyes. "I want to understand your kind. You humans are fragile, insignificant, and yet you persist. Why?" Ethan shrugged. "Maybe because we don't know how to quit. Call it stubbornness or stupidity, either way, it gets the job done." "Stubbornness isn't strength," Lerva said. "It's a weakness." "Is it?" Ethan countered. "You've fought plenty of wars, right? How many times have you won because your enemy gave up too soon?" Lerva frowned. He wasn't wrong. The Trolls' dominance often relied on breaking the morale of their enemies. But humanity, it seemed, was different. They didn't crumble under pressure, they adapted. "You think your persistence makes you special," she said, "but it won't save you. Your species is outmatched in every way." "Maybe," Ethan admitted, "but that's never stopped us before." Lerva stared at him, her frustration growing. No matter what she said, he always had an answer. It wasn't arrogance, it was confidence, and it was maddening. "Tell me," she said, leaning closer. "What's your breaking point?" "Everyone has one." Ethan met her gaze, his smirk fading. "You won't find it. Is that a challenge?" Lerva asked, her voice low and dangerous. "Call it what you want," Ethan said. "But if you're hoping to break me, you're in for a long wait." Lerva straightened, her expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, without a word, she turned and left the chamber. Hours later, Lerva stood in her quarters, staring out at the void of space. Ethan's words echoed in her mind, challenging everything she believed. She prided herself on her ability to dominate, to bend others to her will. But Ethan was different. He wasn't just resisting her, he was changing her. Her thoughts were interrupted by an alert. The ship's systems blared a warning, and Lerva quickly made her way to the command deck. "What's happening?" she demanded. "A rogue faction of Kithran pirates has attacked one of our outposts," an officer reported. "Their fleet is larger than expected." Lerva frowned. The Kithran were opportunistic scavengers, but they rarely posed a serious threat. Still, she couldn't afford to underestimate them. "Prepare the fleet," she ordered. "We'll intercept them before they reach the colony." As her officers carried out her commands, Lerva glanced at the security feed of Ethan's cell. He was sitting calmly, as if the chaos outside didn't concern him. Against her better judgment, she made a decision. Minutes later, Ethan found himself standing on the bridge, surrounded by Troll soldiers. Lerva stood beside him, her towering frame a stark contrast to his smaller stature. "This better be good," Ethan said, glancing around. "I was enjoying my nap." "Quiet," Lerva snapped. "You're here because I need your perspective." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "My perspective? On what?" "The Kithran," Lerva said. "They're attacking one of our outposts. You're a scavenger, you know how they think." Ethan considered this. "You want me to help you stop them?" "I want you to provide insight," Lerva corrected. "Nothing more." Ethan smirked. "And here I thought you didn't trust me." "I don't," Lerva said. but I'm running out of options. The battle was chaotic. The Kithran fleet was larger than expected, their hit-and-run tactics testing even Lerva's disciplined forces. Ethan, despite his lack of formal training, quickly proved invaluable. His knowledge of scavenger tactics allowed Lerva to anticipate the Kithran's movements, turning the tide of the battle. "You're surprisingly useful," Lerva admitted as the last of the Kithran ships retreated. "Thanks," Ethan said. "You're not so bad yourself." As the battle ended, Lerva found herself looking at Ethan in a new light. He wasn't just a prisoner, he was an asset. And perhaps, she thought, he was something more. Chapter 4. Begging for more. The aftermath of the battle was a haze of activity. The Trawl flagship hummed with energy as its crew scrambled to assess damages, compile reports, and restore order. General Lerva stood at the command console, reviewing the engagement. The Kithran pirates had retreated, their fleet scattered, but the victory wasn't as decisive as she'd hoped. Her eyes flicked to Ethan Cross, standing at the edge of the bridge with a nonchalant expression, as if the chaos of the battle had been no more than a passing inconvenience. The man had been instrumental in the fleet's survival, offering critical insights into the Kithran's tactics. But more than that, his calm under pressure, his ability to adapt and anticipate these traits unsettled her. They were not what she expected from a human scavenger. Lerva dismissed her officers with a curt wave and motioned for Ethan to follow her. "We need to talk," she said sharply, her tone leaving no room for argument. Ethan raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as he trailed her through the labyrinthine corridors of the ship. The silence between them was heavy, charged with the weight of unspoken thoughts. Finally, they reached her private quarters, the doors sliding shut behind them with a hiss. The room was stark, utilitarian. No adornments or personal touches, only the bare essentials. Lerva turned to face Ethan, her cobalt blue eyes locking onto his. "You surprised me," she admitted, her voice low. "I didn't think you'd be so effective." Ethan leaned casually against the wall, his arms crossed. "Glad I could exceed your expectations." "Don't be smug," Lerva snapped. "This doesn't mean I trust you." "Didn't think you would," Ethan said with a shrug. "But you brought me here for a reason. So what's on your mind, General?" Lerva hesitated, her jaw tightening. She was not accustomed to questioning herself, to doubting her instincts. But Ethan had a way of turning her assumptions on their head, forcing her to confront uncomfortable truths. "You're different from what I expected," she said finally. "Humans your kind are supposed to be weak, primitive. Yet you defy that image." Ethan's smirk softened into something more thoughtful. "Maybe you've been looking at us the wrong way. Strength isn't just about muscle or firepower. Sometimes it's about resilience, creativity, and knowing when to bend instead of break." "Resilience," Lerva repeated, the word foreign on her tongue. "You think that makes you strong?" "It's kept me alive this long," Ethan said. "And it's why you're still talking to me instead of throwing me out an airlock." She couldn't deny the truth in his words. Ethan's resilience, his refusal to yield it had drawn her in, challenged her beliefs about strength and power. But it also unsettled her. How could someone so unassuming have such an impact on her? "I don't understand you, human," Lerva admitted, her voice tinged with frustration. "You should fear me. You should be broken by now. Yet here you are, defiant as ever." Ethan stepped closer, his gaze steady. "Maybe you're asking the wrong questions. Maybe it's not about why I'm not afraid of you. Maybe it's about why you care." Her breath hitched, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her features before she masked it with a scowl. "Don't presume to understand me." "I'm not trying to," Ethan said, his tone gentle. "But I think you've spent so long being the one in control that you don't know what to do when someone doesn't play by your rules." Lerva stared at him, her mind racing. He was right again. She had built her life around dominance, around bending others to her will. But Ethan wasn't bending. And the more he resisted, the more she found herself drawn to him, to the strange strength he embodied. "I brought you here because I thought I could break you," she said quietly. "But now I wonder, am I the one being broken?" Ethan's expression softened. "Maybe you don't need to break anyone. Maybe you just need to let someone in." Her heart pounded, the vulnerability in his words striking a chord she hadn't realized was there. She had always seen vulnerability as weakness, but Ethan made it feel different, liberating, even. "I don't know what to do with you," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Start by not seeing me as your enemy," Ethan said. "We're more alike than you think." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Lerva stepped closer, her towering frame casting a shadow over him. For the first time, she didn't feel like a conqueror or a general. She felt exposed. "What are you doing to me, Ethan Cross?" she murmured. "Nothing you didn't already want," he replied, his voice steady. The ship jolted suddenly, alarms blaring as the emergency lights flickered. Lerva snapped back to reality, her commanding presence returning in an instant. "What's happening?" she barked into her communicator. "General, the Kithrin are making another pass." An officer's voice crackled through the line. "They've regrouped and are heading straight for us." Lerva cursed under her breath. The moment between her and Ethan shattered. She turned to him, her eyes blazing with determination. "You wanted a chance to prove yourself? Here it is," she said. "Let's see if your resilience extends to battle." Ethan grinned, the tension dissipating as he followed her back to the bridge. "Guess it's showtime." The battle that followed was unlike any Lerva had faced before. The Kithrin pirates, emboldened by their earlier retreat, unleashed a ferocity that tested even the disciplined trawl fleet. Their ships darted through the void like predatory fish, exploiting every weakness. Ethan, standing beside Lerva at the command console, quickly analyzed the situation. His scavenger's mind, honed from years of navigating dangerous territories, proved invaluable. "They're targeting your supply lines," he said, pointing to the tactical display. "If they cut those, your fleet's done." Lerva nodded, barking orders to her officers. "Redirect all fire to sectors 7 and 9. Don't let them through." The trawl ships responded with precision, but the Kithrin adapted just as quickly. It was a game of chess played at light speed, every move countered by another. And in the midst of it all, Ethan and Lerva worked together, their synergy growing with each passing moment. "You're not half bad at this," Lerva admitted as she issued another command. "Neither are you," Ethan said with a grin. "For an alien warlord." She shot him a look but couldn't suppress the smirk tugging at her lips. Despite the chaos, she felt a strange sense of ease. Trust. It was a foreign concept to her, but with Ethan, it felt natural. Finally, after what felt like hours, the Kithrin broke formation. Their ships scattered, retreating into the void. The trawl fleet, battered but victorious, let out a collective cheer. Lerva turned to Ethan, her expression unreadable. "You saved us," she said simply. "Couldn't let you have all the fun," he replied. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the battle giving way to something unspoken. Lerva's gaze softened, and she reached out, her hand brushing against his. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible. Ethan smiled, his grip firm as he clasped her hand. "Anytime, General." As the stars stretched out before them, Lerva realized that her perception of strength had changed. It wasn't just about power or dominance, it was about connection, trust, and the courage to let someone in. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly strong.